bring up an image behind me of a photo I took about 2 weeks ago. I went to the Holy Land, and I got to go to the Sea of Galilee. And this is a newly excavated city called Magdala. It's a place where they believe that perhaps this miracle actually took place. And I want to read to you, as you take a look at this, just keep your eyes on that, focus on that, and enter into this scene from the Gospel of Mark. And a great crowd followed him and thronged about him. And there was a woman who had had a flow of blood for 12 years, and who had suffered much under many physicians, and had spent all that she had, and was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard the reports about Jesus, and came up behind him in the crowd, and touched his garment. For she said, "If I touch even his garments, I shall be made well." And immediately the hemorrhage ceased, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. And Jesus, perceiving in himself that power had gone forth from him, immediately turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my garments?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing around you, and yet you say, 'Who touched me?'" And he looked around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had been done to her, came in fear and trembling and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. Now, I want to pause here. Why is she so scared to death? Usually when Jesus does miracles, people are rejoicing, but she's coming to him trembling in fear. Leviticus 15 says, if you have the condition of this woman, a persistent flow of blood, you are an unclean woman. If you sit on a couch, the couch is unclean. If someone sits on that couch after you sit on that couch, that person is unclean. If someone touches you, they are unclean. If you touch your children, unclean children. Your husband touches you, he becomes unclean. Imagine the life of this woman if she was a mom, couldn't touch her kids for more than a decade, couldn't come near her husband. Or what if she's a single woman? Good luck finding a husband. You can't even physically touch another person. And not only this, like her identity, she isn't even given a name in this. She's the woman with the hemorrhage. And so she's coming in fear because she knows in getting to Jesus, without all these people knowing, I defiled all of them. And I defiled the pure one himself. I brought my dirty, my mess, and I touched him with it, and I made the rabbi himself unclean. So she falls at his feet knowing, what is he going to say? Why did you do this to me? Now I'm unclean, and all these people are unclean. She comes to him in fear and trembling, and he says one word to her first, and he said to her, daughter. You could imagine for the rest of her life, she's going to remember the way that he looked at her in that moment. He not only gave back to her health, he gave her her life back. She could be touched again. He gave her her identity back. My daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease. You could imagine for the rest of her life how she would have told this story. I remember he looked into my eyes and he called me his daughter. And so a lot of times what keeps us from approaching Christ is that shame of no, what I'm going through, what I'm addicted to, what I've been doing when nobody's watching, it's just way too bad. I'm the odd man out in the church, whether it is an addiction to some sexual sin, whether it's struggles with who you're sexually attracted to, your identity, maybe it's gender stuff, maybe it's doubt in God, maybe it's mental health stuff, anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts. Sometimes we just feel so filthy that we feel we can't even get near to God, we can't go to confession, it's just too much. And for a lot of people, and Steubenville's asked us to dive into this today, it's those struggles with sexual sins, with pornography and masturbation. And I know some of you have spoken at your schools, and you probably heard me mention that the first time I got exposed to that stuff, like Paul shared earlier, I was like in second grade. We're riding our bikes around the neighborhood, found some dirty magazine in the street. I'm like, what's that? I'm like, nice to meet you. Like, what do we do with it? My friend said, let's keep it. I'm like, yeah, where do we put it? He said, let's put it at your house. I said, that's a good idea. So ride the bike to my house. And we get there, and I'm like, well, I don't want to put it inside. I'm not getting busted. Like, I had never seen porn before, but I knew something was wrong. So I said, I know what to do. So we ripped out all our favorite pictures, crumpled them up little balls, and then we shoved them into bushes in front of the house. We'd come outside and look at them when we wanted. Now, the problem is, my dad trimmed the hedges Saturday afternoon, found porn growing on the plants out front, so I got busted by the porn plant, but we got back into it. My high school, it was everywhere. No kidding. One guy in my high school actually passed out porn from his locker to anyone who would vote for him as senior class vice president. He's in the hallway. Vote for Travis, vote for Travis. I don't know where he is today. He's probably in Congress by now. But, we would just laugh it off. Look, and I know. I know right now, there's people in the audience, guys might be thinking, oh, whatever, I got some stuff on my phone, I'm not addicted, no one's getting hurt. And when a guy desperately tries convincing himself that porn is not a problem, kind of what happens is he gets emasculated. Because I didn't even know what we were looking at in the porn. Because I'm looking at porn, you're not looking at some naked body. I'm looking at somebody's daughter who's probably sexually abused as a little girl, but we would just laugh it all off and call ourselves gentlemen for enjoying this. Some of the girls in porn aren't even alive. Porn stars have a huge mortality rate, death by drug overdose, murder, suicide. I got an email from a grandpa. His friend's granddaughter was in the porn industry. Now, she died of a cocaine overdose, and after the funeral, the grandpa emails me. And he said, you ever think how sad it is how many guys out there are still lusting after pictures of these girls on their phones without even knowing or caring if she's dead or alive? The sickness of lusting after a girl who could be in her grave right now should make any guy who looks at porn step back and think, man, who have women become to me? Who have I become to women? Some of the girls in porn aren't even human beings. I know one porn company pays computer companies $20,000 a pop to generate fake women. Not airbrush, fake. Legs, eyes, everything on the woman created with a computer. She doesn't exist. They've used fake girls for their cover models. Scientists have found, though, if a guy gets hooked on internet porn for years, you will actually sculpt the structure of your brain to expect every woman to live up to this fantasy of a disposable supermodel. And where does it leave a wife one day? Think about it. Today, in one afternoon of looking at porn, a guy could see more perfect women's bodies than any man in history could have ever seen in hundreds of lifetimes. And you get it in one afternoon, no effort. We're back the next day, back the next week. You do this for a couple of years, and then jump into marriage, think you're gonna be captivated by one till death do you part. It doesn't happen. My buddy in college had all this porn, and he figured, I guess, I'll throw it away before I get married. I went to his wedding, beautiful wedding, divorced in 3 months. All he did was take all that lust he had for porn, look at his bride that way, the marriage is over as soon as it started. One high school girl said to me, she said, Jason, I found out my dad looks at porn. She said, I used to look up to him, now I can't even look at him. Thought he was a better man than that. Every guy in this room knows right now that is not the husband I want to be. That's not the father I want to be. She said to me, I can't even believe that he does this stuff. He's lusting, Jason. He said he's lusting after girls who are 2 years older than I am while my mom's sleeping in the next room. Then he erases internet history, kisses my mom, and goes to work the next day. She said, it makes me sick how much I resent that guy. Every guy in this gym knows right now that is not the husband I want to be. That's not the father I'm going to be. 15 years from now, I'm not going to be some 30-year-old dad who's got to slap my laptop shut when my 5-year-old girl comes in the room because she can't see what dad's seeing. That is not the father I want to be. That's why if you trash the porn today, forever you're being faithful to your brides before you ever lay eyes upon her. Because what are we training ourselves for? It's like when I was in college here, I played 3 years of college baseball. And one day I'm in a game, and the coach yells at me. He's like, Evert, come in. I run the dugout. I'm like, what's going on? Like, you take me out of the game? He's like, no, I want you to pitch. And I'm like, oh, but I don't pitch. He said, no, I saw you in batting practice. Got an arm. I just need you for a couple innings. I'm like, coach, I didn't even pitch high school ball. I don't have the mechanics. He said, you're going to be great. I said, I'm going to look like an idiot. And I get out there. I'm like, what am I going to do? Everybody's ready. Little crowds there. Catcher squats down. Batter digs down. The catcher starts giving me all these signs. You watch baseball, but throw a fastball. If you agree it's the right pitch, nod your head, throw. If you disagree with his pitch selection, shake your head. He'll suggest something different. You want to throw a curveball, knuckleball, cutter, what do you want? My problem, I don't have a good fastball. I don't have a reliable curveball. I don't have a knuckleball. I have a baseball. That's what I have. So I'm like, what am I going to do? I said, I'm going to play mental games with the batter. And so the batter digs in, the catcher squats down. He's like, 1. I'm like, no. He's like, 2. I'm like, not number 2. 3, no. 4, no. 5, no. 6. And at this point, he starts laughing, and he's running out of fingers at this point. He gets number 7. I'm like, oh, yeah, number 7, whatever that is. And the batter's like, how many pitches does he have? I threw the first pitch. I hit the guy on the first pitch. I hit the batter. That's how it goes. But the moral of the story being is if you train yourself for years, lust, and then the day comes to love the woman, you can't fake it. All you know how to do is take your own pleasure. And unfortunately, there's this huge myth right now that porn is a guy problem. Girls? No, girls would never struggle with that. Girls struggle with modesty and emotional issues, but never porn. No, lust is not a guy problem. It's a human problem. I don't know if you saw Billie Eilish. She was on the Howard Stern show in December, middle of the interview with Howard Stern. She just brings up out of the blue that Billie Eilish, she said she first got exposed to porn when she was 11 years old. And this is what she said. She said, the porn, she said, I think it really destroyed my brain. And I feel incredibly devastated that I was exposed to so much porn. She said, I ended up getting nightmares, night terrors, and sleep paralysis from this. She said, and then when she started dating guys, she said, I was not saying no to the things I should have said no to. She said, it was because I thought that that's what I was supposed to be attracted to. She said, I'm just so angry that porn is so loved. And I'm so angry at myself for thinking that it was okay. And I think like her, a lot of girls begin in this curiosity. Okay, what do I need to look like? What do I need to do? And who do I need to be? But women, you were never created to be porn. You were created to be loved, okay? And if we can just get rid of that junk, we can be free to love. And so, and if we're gonna get to freedom, if we're gonna get real freedom though, I think we first gotta dispel a couple of the myths, the excuses we make up why it's not that bad. You know, first thing people say is, oh, well, you don't get all uptight about a little porn or doing this or that, masturbation. Look, sex is natural, okay? Okay, look, all right, fine. Sex is natural, but watching it is not natural. That's really creepy if you think about it, right? I mean, if sex is natural, what if you just like went home tomorrow night after the conference, maybe about midnight, you just leave your house, jump the fence, go over to your neighbor's yard, go to the back window of his master bedroom, and just kind of look in there, you know, and then when the husband comes to you with a shotgun, you can be like, hey, sex is natural, okay? And he's like, you're right. I never thought about that. Take a seat. Watch the show. No. Sex natural, watching it creepy, okay? Sex is natural. Having an erotic moment with your laptop is not natural, okay? And so that objection, dismiss it immediately. Doesn't work. Second objection, people would say, oh, but look, it's not like I'm actually doing it. Look, I know I'm doing this, but I'm not doing that. You'll notice how often we do this with sexual sin. Yeah, I'm looking at porn, but I'm not actually doing it. Or yeah, I hooked up with the girl, but we didn't go all the way. Or yeah, she's sleeping with her boyfriend, but it's not like that's all there is to the relationship. No matter how far we go, we look for something worse to compare ourselves to it so we can feel a little bit better about our sin. But we can't do this because if you're ever doing something right or good, you never make excuses for that. It's not like you're going to be, with your youth group feeding homeless people and making excuses. Like, you're serving the meatloaf to some poor guy, and you're like, well, hey, at least I'm not robbing a bank today. I mean, it's not that bad. Like, you don't make excuses when your conscience is at rest. Because at the end of the day, God doesn't care what you're not doing, right? It's not like at the end of the world, at the final judgment, we're all going to be gathered together with all the hosts of the angels, and then God the Father is going to call me to front. Jason, come for your judgment. And I stand, I'm like, oh, here we go. And he's like, Jason, tell me, what did you not do? And I'm like, wow, I am glad you asked that question. I was not part of an international terrorist organization. I did not join a Mexican drug cartel. I did not burn down any orphanages. And he will say, well done, my good and faithful servant. Enter into your reward, okay? It doesn't work like that, all right? He doesn't care what you don't do. Sometimes we get so busy looking at what we're not doing because we don't want to look at what we actually are doing. And so we need to get rid of that objection. It's not like I'm doing this. The third objection people say is, well, nobody's getting hurt. And okay, aside from how ridiculous that is, when you look at the trauma to the people in the sex trade industry, look at the harm it does to the viewer themselves. I was speaking in an all-girls Catholic high school in the Midwest. Teacher brings me into class after the assembly to do like a Q&A with girls, and she mentioned that earlier she had brought a bunch of college guys to her classroom. These were Catholic college boys on home from spring break to share about their faith and how they stayed strong in their faith at college in front of like 30 high school girls. During the course of that discussion, it came up that one of those guys looks at porn. And the teacher said to this young man in front of 30 teenage girls, she said, well, don't you think that that could present a problem in your marriage? And he's like, what, that I look at porn? He's like, why would that be a problem? Isn't that what a wife is for? Oh, no, not actually. Marriage is not the fulfillment of porn. Porn is the distortion of human love. But we end up putting on these porn goggles where we don't even know how to look at a person except through the lens of lust. And the price we pay for this in dating and courtship and our vocation is heavy. I know a girl lives in Colorado, beautiful, young adult, single woman, just wants to find a godly man. And she said, I'm telling you, Jason, every guy I meet, even in the Catholic young adult community, they're all looking at porn. She said it's gotten to the point where I ask them that on the very first date because I just want to get it out of the way. Are you still looking at porn or not? And typically a guy will say, yeah, I look at it from time to time. And what she says to them is this: You cannot ask me to commit to you if you are not ready to be faithful to me. And you know what the guys say? The guys say, fair enough. It's reasonable. I can either have my pixels or I can have my person, but I may not have both. So decide what you want for the long run. And so we've got to look at the price that we're paying. And so why do we stop these habits? Shame is not enough. Guilt is not enough. Guilt is like, okay, I did something bad. Shame is deeper. It's I am bad because of what I did. That is not going to motivate you to live a virtuous life. The only thing that you can use to overcome a desire like this is a greater desire, which is that of authentic love. Because a buddy of mine in college had a poster in his dorm. He said, a knight cannot be brave unless he has love. His love gives him his courage. Love for his country, love for freedom, love for his family and his wife. That's what sends the man to the battle, is love, not hatred for the enemy. And so, okay, I want to be motivated. I want to be free to authentically love. How do I break free, though? I've been trying to get rid of that junk for years. I don't need to be convinced it's wrong. I just don't know how to find freedom, because I try, and then I fall back. And then I'm doing good for a couple weeks, and then I just fall back. What is going to actually give me lasting success? I'm going to come up with just a couple things I think you can do. First off, what are your triggers of lust? Think of the acronym BLAST, B-L-A-S-T. Are you bored, lonely, angry, stressed, or tired? Think about it. Okay, when I mess up with that, yeah, I'm usually bored and I'm lonely. Or yeah, I'm usually angry and I just turn to that stuff to like medicate my anger. Okay, first let's find the trigger there, because there's a legitimate unmet need that we actually have to take care of. Maybe it's aloneness, but they say the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's human connection. And so maybe what we need is to resolve that loneliness, not by going to the isolation of shame of porn, but finally opening up to people and having authentic intimacy. So first, check your triggers. Second thing, it's even deeper than that, is the roots. What is it you're really craving for? Is it just simply to see someone beautiful? Usually it's deeper. Sometimes it's I want to be looked at with desire because I just feel unwanted. Maybe I just feel unlovable, and just for a minute I feel like I'm wanted. I know it's fake, but man, at least I feel desired for 30 seconds of my day. Where's that deeper craving? Is it a desire to humiliate, a desire to hurt? Sometimes there's some deep issues there. Sometimes there's even roots in sexual trauma, but I'm telling you, the porn, the masturbation, the cutting, the eating disorders, all that is just the fruit. But let's go deeper. The root is often a wound that hasn't been healed. Out of an unhealed wound sprout lies. You deserve what happened to you. You're not lovable. You're not wanted. God has abandoned you. You're not going to ever be enough. All these lies sprout from the unhealed wounds, and then the fruits bloom forth from those lies. But we got to look beyond the fruit, beyond the lies, down to the wounds, and invite Christ into those places. I mean, in this beautiful painting, you'll notice, if you can see close enough her hand, the artist who did this studied the hands of dozens and dozens of dying, sick women, and to just study the way he would draw a sick woman. And the only part of her that's healed is the part of her that's come in contact with Christ. And the healing is beginning to come up her hand into her whole body. But she comes to him in her ugliness, in the woundedness, because Christ is not afraid of your ugly. It reminds me of Pope John Paul II. When he first became Pope, he's walking through the Vatican gardens, and there's a landscaper there he hadn't met yet. And he went up to the guy and he said, "Oh, we have not met before." And the landscaper's digging in the mud and sprinklers or whatever, and so his hands are filthy. I mean, just covered in dirt and grime. And he looks at the Pope. He wants to shake his hand, whatever, but he can't. It's filthy. John Paul takes the man by the wrists, pulls him close, wipes his filthy hands all over his papal cassock, and says, "Don't worry, now that I'm the Pope, I don't have to do my laundry anymore." And so this is the God that we have. Come to me in your woundedness, that place that you thought made you a second-class citizen in the church because those attractions you feel, that addiction you have, maybe that is actually the point of encounter with Christ where it all begins. But to open up, we have to be like that woman, pressing through the crowds, beginning to open up with accountability. And what that means is like, am I really talking to my youth minister about this, to my family, to a counselor, to my friends? I remember one guy said, "Jason, I've tried everything to break free from porn. I've tried the filters, I've had the accountability, I've read books, I've gotten apps, I've done this. And Jason, you're the first person I've ever told." I'm like, look, if I'm the first person you've ever opened up to about this, then you haven't tried the most important step. In fact, when we start to open up, you're going to get insights into yourself that you can't see. Others will give you. I know of a Christian guy. This guy was not living a good life. This guy, I don't know him personally, read about this guy. He was cheating on his wife, going to strip clubs, prostitution, looking at porn, masturbation, you name it, he was addicted to it. And one day he finally gets the guts, and he pours it all out to his Christian brother, this friend, and he just tells him everything that he's been done. He's like, I know at church you guys all think I'm all the good guy, but man, I'm not the man I look like at church. I'm a broken man, and here's what's going on in my life. And his friend, good, long-standing Christian, looked at the guy and said, you know what? If what you really want to do is look at porn and masturbate, then go ahead and do it. This guy was kind of taken aback because he knew this guy was an upstanding Christian man. He said, what? And he said, yeah, if what you really want to do is look at porn and masturbate, then go ahead and do it. And his friend was frustrated, and he slammed his hand on the desk, and he said, no, that's not what I really want. And his friend smiled at him and said, exactly. And for him, it was this watershed moment. Maybe I'm not all bad. Maybe I'm not this deprived, broken individual. Maybe deep beneath all my broken cravings is this wellspring, welling up, a desire for authentic, pure, beautiful love. Maybe God gave me that craving for something, and I've just been binging on the counterfeit. And so when we bring these things, we open our wounds to others, they can help us to see stuff we can't. A friend of mine says, your mind is like a bad neighborhood. Don't go in there alone, okay? And so you need some company going in there, all right? It could be counseling. Go get that if you have the opportunity. But then also to open up to your church in confession. And some people are like, I'm not going to confession. What if I tell the priest what I did? That's the point. Like, you did not break the 11th commandment for the very first time. He's going to call Pope Francis afterwards. I've never heard of this before, Holy Father. Pope Francis wouldn't care. He'd be like, no hablo inglés, click. So just go. And look, I know it could be awkward. I remember when I was in school here, I'd done some real stupid stuff. And so I went to a priest in confession. Now, he was visiting from France. So I thought, sweet, he's from France. I'll never see him again. This is perfect. Now, bad attitude where I was at, though. So I get there, hey, Father, forgive me. I did this. And he says to me, Jason, for your penance, I want you to tell Jesus that he has a problem. I'm like, dude, what? He says, I want you to tell Jesus he has a problem. I said, you want me to tell Jesus that he has a problem? And he's like, oui, yes, I'm like, but I don't understand. He says, well, look, do you belong to Jesus? I said, yes, I belong to Jesus. And he says, well, then Jesus has you. You are a big mess. You are a problem. Jesus has you. Jesus has a problem. And I'm like, I like it. But what a beautiful way to look at your sins. Quit taking yourself so seriously. St. Francis de Sales said, have patience with the whole world, but first of all with yourself. And so I know before you're walking into confession, you're all nitpicking and nervous and like, oh, how am I going to say this? And how can I nuance that so it doesn't sound as bad as it really is? And you're always just looking at all these little imperfections. The way I look at it, though, is we need to quit focusing so much on ourselves and think of the joy you're bringing Christ when you walk in there. A buddy of mine I played baseball with here invited me to be one of the groomsmen in his wedding. And I remember being there, and he's a big guy, 6 foot something, big athlete, and he's getting married there. And we're back in the front of the church, and I'm standing next to him, and he's like, yeah, I'm getting married, all tough. And then you could see kind of the silhouette of his bride behind the stained glass windows in the back of the church. And he's all tough and whatever. Then the doors swing open, he's like, dude, just lost it. But before those doors swung open, what's his bride doing back there? She's probably so nervous. Like, okay, is my hair okay? Are my earlobes uneven? Are my eyelashes gonna fall off? Is it all together? Like she's looking at all these little imperfections. But when her groom sees his bride, like the Song of Songs says, oh, you have ravished my heart, my sister, my bride. One glance of your eyes, all these imperfections melt away in the glance of the beloved. And so when you come to him in confession, look, I know it could be awkward. I remember one day I was living off campus, and I get home, my roommate's watching TV. I'm like, hey, Dario, you want to go to the field house and work out with me? He's like, no, I'm just watching TV. I'm like, all right, bud, I'm going to go study. I'll come back, ask again. So he went and studied, came downstairs. I'm like, you sure I'm going? You want to come to the gym? No, I'm going to watch TV. I'm like, all right, man. Come work out for an hour and a half, come back. He's still sitting on the TV watching World Cup. He's like an Italian. That's like a religious thing. They watch it for weeks on end, the soccer. And I said to him, Dario, dude, you got to get up. You're just kind of being idle. Now, he didn't know English real well, so he thought that I said the TV was his idol. And I'm like, no, I-D-L-E, not I-D-O-L. You're just kind of sitting around a lot. But he felt convicted of the sin of idolatry, okay? And he decided to go to confession to a priest who was very old and nearly deaf to confess the sin of idolatry, which sounds an awful lot like another sin, namely adultery, which is what the priest thought he said. So gets in the, hey, yo, Father, forgive me, I'm guilty of adultery.
Oh, that's very serious.
Not really.
Oh, yes, it is very serious.
Gee, Father, it's just something to do.
No, it's not something just to do.
Like, don't you think you're overreacting? Sometimes friends come over too. Blah! People outside the confessional. I'm going to that priest, believe it or not, they never resolved this huge miscommunication. You got a gigantic penance, but hey, it was worth it. So just go. And to be totally frank with you, I think the reason sometimes, the deepest reason why we don't open up, why we don't have accountability, is not because of shame. You know, honestly, what it is? We have retained an affection for our sins. Because those sins have been a companion to us in some pretty dark times. Those times when we just wanted to turn off our emotions, when we just want to forget about the hurt, when we want to feel wanted, when we want to escape, when we want to feel some bliss, we go to them like a drug. And they become a false companion to us in these times of darkness. And we don't want to cut it off because sometimes we just don't want to feel what we're feeling. I don't want to feel this aloneness so I can run to this thing, and it's going to be there for me. And we turn to these things. But those feelings that we're running from is the very place that Christ wants to encounter us in our brokenness. And so if you want to sever this affection for sin, a couple things we need to do. We need to guard our senses. St. John Chrysostom said, your 5 senses, sight, taste, touch, smell, all that, are the 5 entry points of a majestic castle that is your soul. And if you do not have a guard standing at the entry point of your 5 senses, then any infidel can enter into your kingdom and take possession of it. And so ask yourself, do I really have a filter over my eyes? Do I have custody of the eyes? Do I have a filter over the things that I listen to? There needs to be a guardian there. How do we avoid these occasions of sin? I'll just give you one basic tip. When it comes to social media, some of it is objectively wrong, some of it's kind of neutral, harmless, but here's a challenge to you. I'm going to throw it out there to you. When it comes to using social media, I know this is going to be a big sell. Don't use it when you're lying down, okay? It's like, whoa, wait a minute. That's like my ventilator. Like, what do you mean I can't use that laying down? Think about it. It becomes, when you go to bed, the lights go off, the screens go on, the scrolling begins, the reels, the images of everyone else's perfect hair and perfect body, perfect boyfriend, perfect life, perfect relationship, or maybe you just want to see the funny stuff, the sexual stuff. We go there, and this habit begins to become a routine. The routine becomes a ritual. The ritual becomes a devotional, but it is a false devotional. This is not the way to go to rest at night, distracted from the hurts of life. We need to go to bed recollected, meaning instead of the social media, what if we did evening prayer? What if we listened to some Gregorian chant, examined our conscience, did the liturgy, the hours, did a prayer app or something? Let's change the bookends of our day. Are we waking up to the screen? Okay, make it a prayer app. Am I going to bed to a screen? Make it Gregorian chant. Make it some sacred music, Matt Maher, whatever. Like, change the bookends of your day, and all that lies between those bookends will begin to stand up in greater order. And so, challenge you to do this. There's resources in the bookstore. It's full of them, of different stuff out there. We've got 2. One for the guys, Matt Fradd and I did, was called Forged, 33 Days to Freedom. It's a whole program to break free, fellowship as guys. Kelsey Skoke came out with this one, Uncompromising Purity. Lust is not just a guy problem, where she tackles this from a feminine perspective. These aren't the only resources, tons of them out there. There's little accountability cards they put on the seats, and this will just basically give you a game plan of confession, accountability, prayer. Toss it in your wallet, and when you're feeling, hey, I feel like I'm backsliding, go back to that and remind yourself what needs to happen. And so guard your senses. Also, strategies. Just let's get super practical. Okay, Jason, this all sounds great, but let's say I walk out of the gym, and then I see that girl, and I'm totally tempted to this or that, or maybe I'm in church, and I have some flashback of some pornographic memory. Like, what do I do in that moment? If you don't have a strategy for your temptations, you will always be caught flat-footed. It's like when I played baseball in grade school, Little League, there was no strategy. I'm standing in the outfield, and I'm chewing on my mitt and thinking about dinosaurs and all that stuff. And someone hits the ball to you, and you're like, oh, look, you pick it up, and okay, what do I do with it? Okay, that kid's screaming at me, I'll throw it to him. No strategy. By the time I'm playing NCAA baseball, the game is so fast. You have to be ready. I remember my girlfriend I was dating at the time in college said, she came to one of the games, she's like, don't you get bored in the outfield? The whole inning, no one even hit you the ball. I'm like, no, I'm not bored. There's a game in the game. I said, look, for example, there's a guy on first base, there's one out. we've got a pitcher who's throwing fast, so he's more likely to hit to the opposite field because he's going to be behind the pitch. And so I need to shift a little bit. We got a runner on first, so if it comes to me on the ground, I've got to go to third base with it. If it comes to me in the air, I've got to throw to second base in case he tags up. And if I think about that, after the pitch is thrown, way too late, I've already missed the play, I'm going to be sitting on the bench. Same thing with temptations. If you don't have a strategy and then the temptation comes, you're just caught flat-footed. So what's your game plan? Here's one I would recommend. Let's say you're tempted. Could be in the gym, memory, at nighttime, whatever alone. Just stop. Guys, let's say you see a beautiful woman. Okay, stop. Make a little sign of the cross on your forehead. Then I'm going to take every thought captive to Christ. And think of the 4 parts of the cross. The first part of the cross is up. So if you see someone beautiful, guys, why don't you say, God, thank you for making her beautiful. You could pray Psalm 84. How lovely is your dwelling place, Lord mighty God, okay? And so the first act, the first movement of the heart is not a neurotic repression. Some people say, well, if you see a tempting woman, bounce your eyes. And if you see another immodest woman, bounce your eyes. And then another one, bounce your eyes. It's like, okay, look, we live in the land of yoga pants. Like, you're going to get, like, whiplash after 30 seconds of doing this, all right? Like, it ain't easy, all right? And so, to me, there's got to be a more substantial answer to the human body than no, because the ultimate answer to the human body is yes. It's an invitation to love. Okay, well, how do I love some pornographic billboard? Okay, well, here's how. You see the beauty? You thank God for the beauty. Thank you, God, for making her beautiful. But don't stay there. Now the cross comes down. Think of this as contrition. But God, I'm sorry for the times I've lusted after your daughters. Please create in me a clean heart. And so we're in contrition. But don't stay down in shame. Now the cross comes up. It goes off to the side. Look at her hand. She have a wedding ring? Pray for her and her husband. No wedding ring? Pray for her future vocation. You're transforming temptation into intercession. It's kind of like a spiritual Tai Chi, right? That's like that martial art where you use your opponent's aggression against them. And so the temptation comes, you transform it into intercession. But then you don't remain with her, of the object of beauty. Go away from her. Where did her beauty come from? She is a fragment of the infinite. Her beauty is just a glimmer of the infinite beauty that you were created to be united to God in heaven. And so ultimately, her beauty leads you into a little prayer of adoration. And if you could remember these 4 little parts, or just 1 or 2 of them, you'll lift your heart to God in these times of temptation. One guy told me, college guy, he said, Jason, I read that in your book a while back. He said, I started doing that all summer. He said, it was a game changer. He said, by the end of the summer, he said, I started developing acne in the shape of a cross on my forehead. I'm like, you are awesome. I'm like, but just do it on the side of your head, maybe for moving forward, but better for your complexion. But these little strategies are so helpful. But ultimately, we've just got to remember that purity at the end of the day, it's a gift. It's not just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. This is a gift. Use your body to ask for that gift. If you're sinning with your body, use your body to pray. Pray the rosary, fast, bless yourself with holy water, receive Holy Communion, make the sign of the cross when you're tempted. Because at the end of the day, this is not a question of if we can win this battle. This is one we can't afford to lose. Everything is on the line here. Our whole vocation is on the line. Our ability to love rightly is on the line. Because I'm going to be frank with you, gentlemen. Guys, if you never overcome a habit of lust, porn, and masturbation, if you do get married, you will never make love to your wife. You will simply use your wife's body as an outlet for what you think of as your sexual needs, and I'm telling you, a woman's heart can tell the difference. What that woman's heart longs for is what John Paul II called all of the peace of the interior gaze. That she knows that you have fought these interior battles and you have fought manfully. And maybe it's been a long battle, but you're in the battle, you're fighting, you're winning to the point where you can look at her body. And instead of seeing it as some object for your selfish gratification, you see a respected and beloved companion. And John Paul says this creates the fullness of the intimacy of persons. Lust blocks intimacy. Lust is the destroyer of love, and God has tapped you, gentlemen, to be the defenders of love against its enemy, which is lust. This is what our hearts crave for, and this is what is on the line, our freedom to love. Because if we can find victory here, listen to what St. Augustine said of Job. He said, Job was turned over to the devil to be tempted, so that by withstanding the test, he would be a torment to the devil. And so if you're backsliding, if you've made mistakes, be patient with yourself. Don't lose your peace. Because yeah, God knows when you slip up, but you know what? He also sees your victories, and you've had a lot of them. And he's with you in the battlefield, and he's cheering you on. So don't lose your peace and think it's all failure. Hey, you fall down 7 times, get up 8. Because these tips were thrown out. This is not a quick fix. This weekend you're going to get this high, and that's great, but it's not supposed to be just like I'm going to go down. This is supposed to be a ramp to launch you deeper into the interior life. Our struggle is going to come, yeah, May some of these battles last months, years, I don't know. But what matters in the Christian fight is that you're not the one giving up, that you keep fighting. In fact, there was a saint, a buddy of mine's always reading books about saints. And I said, hey, you reading any good saint books lately? He said, yeah, I'm reading about saints and addictions. I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like saints who help people with their addictions. And he's like, no, I'm reading about the addicted saints. I'm like, well, I don't remember reading them in theology class. I mean, who's that? And he said, oh, read this guy, Saint Mark Ji Cheng Zhang from China. This guy's a husband, father, and a doctor. And he became sick with a stomach ailment, so he treated himself with the drug opium, which was used to treat that ailment at the time. The illness was resolved, but a drug addiction remained in its place. And so he went to confession. Hey, Father, forgive me, I become addicted to this drug. And the priest gave him absolution, some advice, and Mark went home, and he fell back into the drug addiction. So he went back to confession, got some advice, back to confession, addiction, confession, addiction, confession. Sound familiar? And it comes to the point where the priest said to him, now, Mark, because you keep confessing the sin, it tells me that you're not really sorry for it. And because I don't think you're very sorry, I would ask you to no longer receive Holy Communion and do not come back to the sacrament of confession until you've overcome this vice, which is obviously very bad pastoral advice to give, but the priest didn't know how to handle these issues of addiction. But Mark obeyed him. And he still went to Mass with his family, his wife and his kids, but he didn't receive communion, wasn't worthy. He didn't go to confession because he wasn't perfect yet. And a month went by, no sacraments. The month became a year became 10, 10 became 20, 20 became 30 years away from the sacrament. And it came to the point where he just started begging God to make him a martyr, because he said, I couldn't see any other way to get to heaven but to die for my faith. And God answered his prayer. In the year 1900, the Boxer Rebellion swept across China. Christians were rounded up and executed. He and 9 members of his family were dragged off to the place of torture and death. And as they're being dragged out of the house, his grandsons said to him, Grandpa, where are we going? And Mark said to him, we're going home. Brought them to the place of execution, and one by one, they started cutting off the heads of the members of his family. And he begged the torturers to kill him last, so that nobody in his family would have to die without him by their side, encouraging them to be faithful to the very, very end. And one by one, they beheaded everybody in his family until at last they severed his head off as he was singing the litany of the Blessed Virgin Mary. And today he is a canonized saint who died addicted to opium, which is proof that the saint is not the one who does not have a mess in their life. The saint is the one who gives their mess utterly to Jesus Christ. So whatever your mess is, if your mess is you, your mess is your parents, your mess is your addictions, let's just give it entirely to him. Because as St. Therese of Lisieux said, it is a much better thing to talk to God than to talk about God. And so let's close our time together in prayer. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen.